Welcome back to the deep dive. You sent over some research on climate change.
Yeah.
And honestly,
Mhm.
it can feel a bit overwhelming sometimes.
Absolutely.
Like, where do you even begin with a topic this big?
Yeah,
But that's why we do these deep dives.
exactly.
To really break it down.
Yeah.
So we can sift through all the information
Hmm.
and find those key pieces.
Yeah.
The stuff that really matters.
It's like we're putting together a puzzle, right?
Yeah.
A puzzle to understand climate change.
Exactly. A climate change puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe let's start with the most basic question.
Sure.
How do we even define climate change?
Right.
I mean, it's got to be more than just a few hot summers
Oh, for sure.
or, a cold winter here and there.
Yeah. It's definitely a lot more than that.
Right.
The UN, they define it as long-term shifts
Okay.
in temperatures and weather patterns.
So we're talking decades, even centuries of change.
Yeah. We're talking about lasting changes to
But
the Earth's entire climate system.
Okay, lasting changes, I get that.
Mhm.
But haven't these types of shifts always happened?
Right.
I mean, naturally.
Yeah.
Think about volcanoes. They
Yeah.
erupt,
Sure.
and that changes things.
Yeah.
Or the sun's activity that's always in flux, right?
Yeah, you're right.
So haven't these things always been factors in the Earth's climate?
You're absolutely right.
Okay.
Natural factors have always played a role.
Mm-hmm.
But what's different now
Okay.
is the extent of human activity.
Okay.
Since the 1800s,
Right.
it's become the dominant driver.
So we're talking Industrial Revolution
Yep.
and onward.
Yeah.
It's we've sped things up,
Like thrown a wrench into the Earth's natural climate cycle.
and that wrench, so to speak,
Yeah.
is primarily fossil fuels, right?
Exactly.
Burning coal, oil, gas.
Yeah, that's how we power so much
It's everywhere.
of our world, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And all that burning
Mhm.
releases massive amounts of greenhouse gases
Okay, greenhouse gas.
into the atmosphere.
Those are the ones that trap heat, right?
Yeah, think of it like
Okay.
wrapping the Earth in an extra blanket.
So more blankets, more heat.
Exactly. And that extra heat
Yeah.
that causes temperatures to rise.
So all those cars, all those factories.
That nice all adds up.
It's we're all contributing to this giant blanket factory.
It really is a collective effort, unfortunately.
It's kind of hard to imagine the scale of it.
It is, and the crazy thing is,
Yeah.
there's virtually unanimous agreement in the scientific community about the fact that humans are responsible
Uh-huh.
for almost all the global warming over the past 200 years.
200 years. So since the early 1800s?
Yeah, and we're talking about a 1.2 degrees Celsius increase
Okay, 1.2 degrees.
in global surface temperature since then.
Honestly, 1.2 degrees doesn't sound like a lot.
Right.
I mean, on a day-to-day basis.
I know what you mean.
Right. Is a degree or two really that big of a deal?
Well, think about it this way.
Okay.
That 1.2 degree increase is already fueling
Okay.
extreme weather events.
You're talking
Yeah. Heat waves,
okay.
droughts, intense storms,
Right.
the whole shebang.
So it's not just about the number on the thermometer.
Exactly.
It's about what that number means
Mhm.
for the actual planet.
Yeah, for the real world.
Right. The real world impacts.
And here's the thing.
Yeah.
It's only going to get worse.
Oh, no.
The last decade was the warmest on record,
Right.
and each of the last 4 decades
Wow.
has been warmer than any other since 1850.
It's like a never-ending heat wave.
It is a consistent
Yeah.
and frankly alarming trend.
So we're talking about a serious problem.
Yeah.
And it's not just about hotter summers.
It's a whole lot more than that.
Right. There's got to be a ripple effect
Super
through
strange.
all of Earth's systems.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Okay, good.
Climate change impacts a complex system. Think about it.
Right.
Warmer temperatures
Yeah.
lead to more evaporation,
Right. Makes sense.
which can intensify droughts
Oh,
in some areas,
okay.
and heavier rainfall.
There are droughts in some
Oh,
places
exactly.
and floods in others.
And
okay?
flooding in others.
Just from that one change.
Yeah, it's all connected.
And then there's the whole rising sea level thing.
Oh, right.
From glaciers
Yeah.
and ice sheets melting.
It's already impacting coastal communities.
Seriously.
Absolutely.
It's happening now.
Yeah. And that melting ice
Mm-hmm.
contributes to another major problem.
Which is?
Loss of biodiversity.
Oh, right. Like the polar bears.
Exactly. They're losing their hunting grounds.
Because of the melting ice.
as the sea ice disappears.
It's like a domino effect.
It is. Entire ecosystems are being disrupted.
So we're talking impacts on land,
Mm-hmm.
in the water,
Yeah.
and in the air.
It's a truly global issue.
It's a lot to take in.
It is.
And it's not just about the planet itself.
Right. Right. It impacts human societies, too.
In what ways?
Our health,
Okay.
our food security,
Excess.
access to clean water,
Right.
even the safety and stability of our homes.
So basically everything.
All of these are at risk.
It's a bit overwhelming to think about.
It is a lot.
Out of all of that,
Yeah.
what would you say is the most concerning consequence?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
There's so many to choose from.
Right.
But for me, it's the potential for mass displacement
Okay.
and climate migration.
Like people having to leave their homes
Exactly.
because of climate change.
Imagine losing your home and livelihood
Wow.
because of rising sea levels
Yeah.
or prolonged drought.
That's a scary thought.
It's a humanitarian crisis in the making.
Yeah. It really is.
It's definitely a sobering thought. Yeah, it really is a tough thing to think about.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
it's important to remember that we're not powerless. We
Yep.
can still do things.
Okay, good
Yeah,
about this
man.
challenge.
That's good to hear because, honestly, the first part of this deep dive, it was a lot to take in.
Yeah, it's heavy stuff.
Yeah, it was a bit heavy. But I'm ready to shift gears now.
Okay.
Let's talk solutions.
Okay, I like that.
What gives you hope?
What gives me hope
Yeah.
is knowing that we actually have a lot of the solutions already.
Really?
Like, we don't have to invent something brand new.
Okay.
It's about implementing what we already know works.
That's good.
Yeah. And the UN report, it lays out 3 main categories
Okay, 3 categories.
for tackling this.
Let's hear them.
So first, we got to cut emissions.
Okay, cutting emissions. That makes sense.
Then we got to adapt to the impacts that are already happening.
Okay.
And then we got to finance the adjustments.
Okay, so it's like a 3-pronged approach.
Exactly.
Cut, adapt, and finance.
You got it.
I like it.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's break that down a bit.
Let's start with cutting emissions.
Okay.
Like we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Burning fossil fuels is a huge problem.
Right.
So what needs to change there?
Well, we need to transition away from fossil fuels
How?
completely
Wow, completely.
and shift towards renewable energy sources.
Okay, so things like
Yeah, solar,
renewable-
wind, yeah.
hydropower.
Okay, got it. All that good stuff.
So we have the technology for this.
We do, and it's actually getting really good.
Okay.
Like, it's advanced so much
Wow.
that it's becoming cost competitive with fossil fuels.
So it's not just good for the planet.
Yeah.
It could actually be good for our wallets, too.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that.
Yeah, it's a win-win.
But how quickly do we need to make this switch?
Well, the UN report says the next few years are critical.
Okay, so
To
what?
stay below that 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold,
Right.
we need to cut global emissions in half by 2030.
2030, that's like
Yeah.
right around the corner.
It is.
That seems like a pretty big goal.
It is ambitious,
Yeah.
which means we need everyone to take action.
Everyone.
Governments, businesses, and individuals.
So what does that look like, practically speaking?
Right.
If someone's listening to this right now
Yeah.
and they're thinking, okay, I want to do this.
Mm-hmm.
I want to reduce my reliance on fossil fuels.
Yeah.
What can they actually do?
There are a lot of things you can do.
Okay.
Even small changes can add up.
Like what?
Well, start with your transportation habits.
Okay, transportation.
When you carpool more often,
Okay.
take public transportation,
Mm-hmm.
bike, walk instead of driving.
Okay, so more active transportation for longer trips.
Yeah.
Maybe consider a more fuel-efficient vehicle
Right.
or an electric car if that's possible.
Exactly.
Okay, so being smart about how we get around.
Yeah.
And what about at home?
At home, you can make a difference too.
Okay.
Using energy-efficient light bulbs.
Okay, that's easy enough.
Unplugging devices when you're not using them. Right.
And even just being mindful of your thermostat settings.
Okay, so like little things.
Yeah, little things can add up.
But what about the impacts that are already happening?
Right.
Like, we can try to cut emissions,
Mm-hmm.
but the climate is already changing.
It is.
So how do we adapt to that?
Well, adaptation is about protecting people and systems
Okay.
from those impacts.
Okay, so being prepared.
Yeah,
Yeah.
acknowledging that climate change is happening
Mhm.
and taking steps to minimize the damage
Okay.
and build resilience.
It's like we've already set sail
Mm-hmm.
and the seas are getting rougher,
Right.
but we can still batten down the hatches
Yeah.
and try to navigate the storm.
That's a great analogy.
Okay, good.
And adaptation looks different
Right.
depending on where you are.
Yeah, that makes sense.
For coastal communities,
Yeah.
it might mean building seawalls.
To protect against the rising sea levels.
Exactly.
And for farmers,
Yeah.
maybe developing drought-resistant crops.
So it really depends on the specific challenges.
Right, different places, different challenges.
Okay, that makes sense.
But are there any examples of adaptation strategies that have been particularly successful?
Yeah, I'm curious about that.
One great example is early warning systems
Oh, interesting.
for extreme weather events.
Like being able to predict
Mhm.
when and where a hurricane or a flood is going to hit,
Exactly.
so we can get people out of the way,
Yeah, evacuate people.
minimize the damage.
And minimize damage.
Okay, I could see how that would be effective.
And the UN report says these early warning systems,
Yeah.
they're actually incredibly cost-effective.
So they save lives.
They save lives.
And they save money.
They provide up to 10 times the return on investment.
Wow, that's impressive.
That's a win-win for sure.
Definitely a win-win.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about cutting emissions.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about adapting to the impacts.
Right.
Now we're going to talk about the third piece,
Yeah.
financing.
The money.
The money, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
All these changes sound expensive.
They are, but
Who's going to pay for all this? Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it?
it is.
Like, we're talking about shifting away from fossil fuels,
Mm-mm.
adapting to a changing climate.
Yeah.
All this stuff sounds,
It's a big undertaking,
yeah, massive.
but it's important to remember
Okay.
that inaction is far more expensive in the long run,
So it's like pay now
Yeah.
or pay later.
but the later payment is
Yeah.
going to be a whole lot bigger.
I see. So it's like ignoring a small leak in your roof.
Exactly.
You can put a bucket under it for a while.
Yeah.
But eventually,
You got to fix the roof.
you got to fix the roof or
Yeah.
risk major damage.
Where you're going to have a much bigger problem.
Okay, exactly.
So when it comes to financing climate action,
Yeah.
it's a shared responsibility.
Okay, share of responsibility.
We need governments to step up.
Okay. Oh.
Investing in renewable energy infrastructure,
Okay.
supporting research and development of
Mm.
new technologies,
Makes sense.
and implementing policies like carbon taxes
Carbon taxes, those are meant
that
to...
incentivize sustainable practices.
Okay, so encourage businesses and individuals
Yeah.
to make better choices.
Yeah.
So governments have a role.
Huh?
But what about businesses themselves?
Businesses are crucial.
Yeah. Why is that?
They have the power to innovate,
Okay.
to create new technologies and solutions,
Mhm.
and to adopt more sustainable practices.
In their own operations.
Exactly.
So it's like leading by example.
Yeah, we need businesses to lead the charge.
Not lag behind.
Definitely not.
So it sounds like we need everyone on board.
We do.
Governments, businesses, and individuals.
It's a collective effort.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah.
And that brings me to a question that's been on my mind this whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I'm just one person,
Right.
what can I really do
Yeah.
in the face of this huge global challenge?
It's easy to feel like your individual actions don't matter.
Right.
But I think small changes multiplied across millions of people
Okay.
can have a huge ripple effect.
So it's not about
Yeah.
one grand gesture.
It's about the collective impact.
It's about lots of little changes.
Exactly. Think of it like voting.
Okay.
One vote might not seem like much,
Right.
but when millions of people vote,
Mm-hmm.
it can change the course of history.
I like that.
So how do we vote for a healthier planet?
Right. How do we do that?
It starts with awareness
Okay.
and a willingness to change our habits.
So like the things we talked about.
Yeah, driving less, using energy more efficiently at home.
Right. Supporting renewable energy.
Exactly.
What about our choices as consumers?
That's huge.
Does that matter?
Every product we buy
Okay.
has a carbon footprint.
Okay.
So being a mindful consumer is crucial.
So what can we do there?
Can you buy less stuff?
Okay.
Choose sustainable products,
Yeah.
locally sourced products.
Okay. So thinking about where things come from
Exactly,
and how
yeah.
they're made.
And reduce your overall waste.
Reduce, reuse, recycle.
Those 3 R's,
They still apply.
they're more relevant than ever.
And what about using our voices?
Yeah, don't underestimate that.
Like talking to people about climate change.
Exactly.
Sharing what we're learning.
Encouraging others to take action.
Okay, so it's not just about changing our own habits.
Right. It's about spreading the word.
It's about influencing others.
And supporting organizations that are working on this.
So like donating,
Donating, volunteering,
volunteering, yeah.
and advocating for stronger policies.
Okay, so like contacting our elected officials to
Exactly.
push for change.
Yeah.
So it's like voting with our wallets,
Uh-huh.
making conscious choices
And using our voices.
to push for systemic change.
It's a multi-pronged approach.
It really is.
And remember, you don't have to do everything perfectly.
Oh, okay, that's good to hear.
Start small, focus on 1 or 2 things,
Yeah,
and build from there.
progress over perfection.
Exactly. Every step counts.
I like that.
Yeah,
Well, this has been a really insightful deep dive.
I'm glad.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
Climate change is clearly a complex issue
It is.
with big consequences, but we also have the knowledge,
Yeah,
the
all right.
tools, and the power to make a difference.
We can do this.
That's a good message to end on.
It is.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.
It was my pleasure.
Until next time, stay curious.
Stay curious.
And remember that collective action can make a real difference.
Absolutely.